You read the title, and as per usual, the fans are doing a better job at 2D Mario than Nintendo is doing themselves. Now, don't get me wrong, Nintendo, I love you to death, but you need to take a serious look at spicing up your next 2D Mario game. These games have just turned into boring cookie-cutter experiences that Nintendo decides to spit out whenever they feel like making a quick buck, it feels like. Now, these games aren't bad by any means, they just fail to innovate on the traditional Mario formula to make it feel like a new game. I think it's pretty obvious by the fact that every single consecutive entry in the new Super Mario Bros. Series has sold worse than the game before it. People want something new. They want a fresh new 2D Mario game with stuff we haven't seen before, and that brings me to the reason I made this video today. We're going to be taking a look at newer Super Mario Bros. Wii, a fan game that many of you may have already heard of before, but is what I think is a great example of the direction that 2D Mario needs to take if Nintendo decides to keep creating games in this specific genre. So, without further ado, let's take a deep dive into my claims and take a close look at newer Super Mario Bros. Wii. The first thing we're going to be covering about newer is its approach to level design. I believe it does a bit better in this department than the official games, but this is far from my main concern about 2D Mario. I believe that New Super Mario Bros. U and 2 showcase some of the best level design in the series, but my main concern will be coming later. However, I feel that newer does a slightly better job at level design because it's not afraid to take risks. It tries new things with each level that haven't necessarily been seen before. This alone keeps the player engaged and yearning to play the next level. I found myself getting bored a lot of the time with the official games and just wanting to stop playing after a while, simply because I didn't feel like the game was throwing me anything new or interesting. It's obvious that Nintendo has been playing it way too safe lately with this genre of Mario, which I kind of don't blame them for. The games still sell, but like I said earlier, it's less and less every time. They need to spice it up soon, or they risk going into the negative. With newer, I was constantly being surprised with each new level and the concepts it brought. Each level gimmick was unique and interesting, and was executed very well from a raw level design standpoint. Gimmicks were also present in the official games, but they weren't nearly as unique or fleshed out as they are in newer, at least in my opinion. Another important improvement I noticed in newer, and my main concern with the official games, was its approach to level themes and world building. A big problem that plagued the official games were levels feeling way too similar to one another, as well as the same world themes being used over and over for every single game. You've all seen the comparisons between 3 clips of footage from a new Super Mario game, and it's revealed that the footage is from 3 different levels even though they aesthetically look exactly the same. When I think of a level in a game, I would expect each one to have its own unique atmosphere and feel, its own identity. But if you look at New Super Mario Bros. Wii, it's obvious that the majority of these levels in each world share the exact same aesthetic feel as each other. This makes every level just merge together in the player's mind, and they have trouble forming memorable experiences from each level, which is very important in overall enjoyment of the game, in my opinion at least. Now, I'm not saying every single level has to have a completely new location with unique assets, because I'm aware of this little thing called limited resources, but simple tweaks can be made to levels that have similar aesthetic identities that can completely change the feel of the level. As an easy example, let's take a look at the first world of newer and how its levels vary throughout. So, this world is themed as a beach and as a forest at the same time, which is a good combination and was actually used in New Super Mario Bros. 2 as well. However, I believe newer handled it a bit better in terms of level themes. So, when you first start the game, you play through a generic beach level, and then move into a generic forest level that is also partially underground. Now, these generic levels are completely fine since they're only used once. That's my entire point here. After those levels, the player is given the choice between 2 more forest levels, but they're both going to feel different from the previous. One of them simply adds trees into the concept of the level that the player can platform across, and even ends with the player climbing up a growing tree to the flagpole. The other level takes place deeper into the forest where there's less light, and this also does a great job of slightly tweaking the level aesthetic to create a whole new feel. After those levels, we are met with the first tower in the game, which is set inside of a tree full of beehives, and you have to scale to the top of it. I believe this is more unique than every tower in the new Super Mario Bros. Games combined, but we'll talk about castles in a bit. After the castle, the player moves across a bridge to a canyon type level. This is different because you can still see the forest below in the background while in the level, but the level maintains its own identity because of the fact that you are now on a bridge crossing a canyon. After that, the levels transition into a more temple-like aesthetic, which leads us into the castle, which is also temple-themed. You can probably see my point now. Each level has a purpose, feels connected to one another, and isn't just a segmented series of challenges slapped onto a world map in no specific fashion. In the same realm of conversation, a lot of levels naturally transition into one another, which is a great added touch that wasn't necessary but contributes to the world building on top of everything else. You can see this being done in World 2-1, for example, where the level ends in a cave, where after the player goes through a pipe into the side of the cliff that leads them to the next levels that take place inside of a sewer inside of said cave. And finally, like I mentioned earlier, let's talk about castle and airship designs. A big problem I had with previous Mario games was that every single castle was themed the same as the last. Sure, some of them added small twists such as water or ice, but it was never enough to give the level its own identity, as I've been saying this entire time. It was all just, oh, here comes the castle, expect stone floors, probably some lava, and a Koopaling at the end. With Newer, that's not the case. We've got some castles set inside of a pyramid, a sewer, a haunted house, and even one set inside a huge building reminiscent of Chinese and Japanese architecture, which was super unique in my opinion. At the end of each tower and castle, there's a completely new and original boss based on enemies you fought earlier in the world. This is a breath of fresh air after 3 games consisting solely of the Koopalings in each boss slot. This time around, the Koopalings are reserved to airship levels, which I believe is a much better fit for them. I don't know why Nintendo is so attached to these guys, but it needs to stop soon. We're all tired of them, and we have been for a while. Speaking of airships though, they also tend to have relatively unique designs as well, which I appreciate because they seem to be just as stale as castles in the previous games. On top of everything else, Newer has a completely new world map that contains quite a few world themes that are completely new to the series. I really appreciate having worlds that aren't as generic as the ones used in all the official games. They were cool at first, but now they just feel overused after this many entries. Additionally, the actual design of the map calls back to the continuity of Super Mario World. A lot of the worlds connect into each other in practical ways, which really helps with making the whole game feel like one big functioning world. The player gets the feeling that they're on a journey, as opposed to just teleporting from, say, a grassland to a desert in an instant. I was never a big fan of that kind of segmentation in games. And you may say that New Super Mario Bros. U brought back the Super Mario World feel with the interconnected worlds, but that's not the case, as it essentially has the same problem as Wii, but the worlds are just not separated by loading screens. Every single world is segmented into its own special area, with paths between them feeling forced or unnatural. In Newer, the majority of the worlds naturally transition into each other and make sense in the grand scheme of the entire journey. Some other things I like about this improved world map are the fact that the map actually tells you when there's a secret exit in the level. I'm really confused as to why they removed this after Super Mario World, as making the player guess which level actually has an alternate exit seems like a waste of time to me. Also, and this is just an opinion, I'm a big fan of the amount of secret exits in Newer as well. There are so many branching paths and choices to make that you will rarely only ever have one level to choose from as your next path. I know that some people hate secret exits, but I thought I would add that in there anyway. I also appreciate the new Toad houses. I felt that they were a bit more fleshed out than the official games. They actually relied on skill and not luck this time as well. Most of the Toad houses in the official games relied on luck and had very little strategy, which always felt a little off to me, as I feel the player should be able to win the item if they're skilled enough to do so. Newer Super Mario Bros. Wii also has a wide array of new and remixed tracks to complement the worlds and levels. Something I noticed with the official games was how often the tracks were reused in the levels. There would be the same music for every single level in the world except if the player was in a castle or underground or underwater. Even in those cases, the same track is used for every castle, underground, and underwater level. The slightly larger variety that Newer offers goes a long way in terms of giving each level its own identity, as well as keeping from annoying the player with the same track playing so often. It was really nice to hear some original tracks that weren't just the older ones with or added as a fresh new twist. Give me a break. Just seems lazy to me at this point. Just take a listen to some of these tracks and you'll also understand why I appreciate the variety in music much more than I should. And finally, let's talk about the difficulty in Newer. I'm a really big fan of the difficulty progression in this game, mostly because it actually, gets difficult. The game offers up some really unique and tricky challenges. I was always surprised at how the game threw difficulty at me, and it felt fresh with each new world that I went to. The official game's difficulty was mind-numbingly easy almost all the way through. This obviously stems from Nintendo's recent efforts to cater to the casual audience, but I really feel like they took it way too far in terms of casualizing their games. Some of their recent games are so easy that it's almost insulting to the player's intelligence. Lives have almost lost all their meaning due to the overabundance of one-ups and easy gameplay. Most levels gave way too much room for error in my opinion, and it just ruined the overall experience for me. The only game that ever came close to a decent difficulty for me was New Super Luigi U, but that wasn't even a fully fledged out game. It literally just felt like a ROM hack for the original Mario U, with all of the original problems present except for a better difficulty and slightly more interesting level design. With Newer, the difficulty curve doesn't cap to help cater to casual audiences in the slightest, but that doesn't mean it's unfair or anything. It's a real, fair, and enjoyable challenge that just gets harder and harder as the game progresses, with plenty of additional optional challenges along the way, such as secret worlds and the end game content. Oh, and playing multiplayer at all will increase the difficulty exponentially, but that's just besides the point. And I'm not going to spoil the final boss for you, but it's definitely my favorite final Mario boss in a long while. And it's quite difficult too. Overall, Newer Super Mario Bros. Wii is a great example of what traditional 2D Mario could be. It surprised me time after time, and I never felt bored or uninterested in the gameplay. I was always eager to see what was next, and learn to expect the unexpected, all while listening to some cool new tunes. The Newer team did an amazing job with this, and they're actually now working on a remake of this same game with updated graphics, polished level design, and even more fresh music tracks, so be on the lookout for that. I'll link their YouTube channel and website in the description for anyone interested in keeping up with developments from them. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. This video was a bit different than my previous ones and took much longer to make, so I really appreciate you staying until the end, and it would mean a ton if you could simply drop a like on the video before you go. You could also follow me on Twitch if you like. If you like all things Nintendo, I think my stream would be great for you. Link in the description. With all that said, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.